It's Monday, January 15th, 2024. It's cold as hell in the Midwest and on the West Coast, but it's never cold where the knee jerks are involved. Oh, I'm trying to spit stuff out. I'm cold. Anyway, I'm sorry. This is the Knee Jerks podcast with Eno, Nick, and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation. Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, to talk Detroit sports and whatever else we want to talk about, Nick Markakis out on the West Coast, our West Coast correspondent, so to speak. Nick, what's up?
Greetings, folks, from sunny Seattle, and it actually is kind of sunny, believe it or not, and cold, which I would rather have it rainy and warm, personally. But
yep, indeed.
Got a lot of good things to talk about.
Oh, yeah, and you were telling me it's like Michigan weather out there. You had some single-digit stuff going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, low double digits, like 12 degrees.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's Michigan weather. And so people, if you see on the video stream, Nick starts turning blue, that's why. So keep that in mind. As always, my partner in crime, the long-term partner of mine on this show, is joining us as well. He is the proud owner of a Substack, the Out of Bounds Substack. That would be Greg Eno. Greg, what's new?
Yes, good to see both of you guys. We're recording on a Monday this time because our fair friend Nick Milanovich is unavailable on Tuesday. So because we love Nick so much, we rejiggered our very busy schedules, Al, to make this work. I had to move a million things around to make this thing work. But anyway, Nick's worth it. I am Greg Eno. You can please subscribe to my Substack, gregeno.substack.com, as it says. If you're watching this podcast, it says in front of my face there, and I would appreciate that. Pretty much every Monday, I bring you something new into your inbox. Today, I went into the same old Lions thing and how I think we should pretty much bury it. It's to me, it's done. It's over with. It should never see the light of day again. So check that out, please, if you would. I'm also excited to announce that 2 weeks and a day from tonight, January 30th, we will record next. And our guests will be, yes, I said guests, plural. Eastern Michigan football coach Chris Creighton will be with us, a good friend of the Knee Jerks, and we'll talk about his, I have to say, disappointing 2023 season for a lot of reasons. The team did go to a bowl game, but just got thumped, and then there was an ugly, ugly incident at the end of that game that we'll hopefully talk to Coach about, and we'll also talk about Kalen DeBoer, his former offensive coordinator, who took the job, believe it or not, at Alabama, replacing Nick Saban. So that's some exciting news. And then immediately following Coach on that same episode, our good friend, our NBA stats guru, Siddy Hall, will be with us for his periodic report on the NBA and the Pistons. And we'll find out from Siddy what he thinks about both of those things. That'll be on January 30th, 2 weeks from tonight, or 2 weeks and a day from tonight. So looking forward to that. But before we get to any of Al's football, we got a very, like it was indicated at the top of the show, football-heavy program with the Lions and the Wolverines. Before we get to any of that, we're going to play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I give Al and Nick a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if one of those guys can guess this person within the first two clues, he will receive the DVD of the Kansas City Bomber, that great movie with Raquel Welch, featuring DVD commentary by Miss Raquel Welch. So that's the one where she plays a roller derby person. So that's a good one.
All right. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's Greg's into the 70s exploitation films. So here we go.
Yeah, next time it'll be Shaft or one of those Pam Grier movies or something.
I want the fish that saved Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah, that's right. A deep cut. There we go, a deep cut.
Gabe Kaplan in that or Bernard King?
Yeah.
Well, I remember Dr. J was in that.
Yeah, I think Bernard King was in it too. Yeah. Anyway, this person made his name in the world of football. He was born on this date in 1979, so he's 45 years old today. He played in the NFL for 20 seasons, 5 of them on the West Coast, and 15 of them, much more famously, south of the Mason-Dixon line, where he won a Super Bowl.
When did you say he was born again?
79.
What year? 79. Won a Super Bowl.
20 seasons in the NFL, first 5 on the West Coast, and the next 15, much more famously, south of the Mason-Dixon line, where he won a Super Bowl.
Man, that's a toughie. It probably wouldn't be, I'm sure it's probably something we'll be able to easily get, but damn, won a Super Bowl 7 the Mason-Dixon line, which would, Nick, you have any ideas?
My first instinct is to say a quarterback, but I can't think of who.
Yeah.
And like who, or a kicker that played 20 years.
Yeah, but that's the thing, I'm thinking of some of the kickers that Greg would be talking about that would have played around the that time frame. I don't know. We may just have to use a punt on this one.
Okay.
Since Nick's
it's
talking
probably
about
a
kickers.
punter for all you know.
Yeah. All right, and we'll hope that the second question will be the gimme for us. Otherwise, I'll have to illegally download Kansas City Bombers. So, all right, with that, who knows? It might be on Netflix. Anyway, we have lots to talk about, guys. I mean, there was probably the best week of football in our lifetime between the University of Michigan winning a national title by taking out Washington. 6 days later, Detroit Lions win their first playoff home game in 30. They won their first playoff game in 32 years, win their first home game in 30 years. Actually their first home playoff game in 30 years. So there's some other things going on, like the Pistons made a huge trade yesterday. Now, essentially the shuffling of deck chairs, but we're going to save our talk with that, since we have our NBA stats guru Siddy Hall will be with us on the next episode. So I'm sure he'll have plenty to say about what's going on with the Pistons right now, who actually did win today. Amazingly enough, they beat the juggernaut that is the Washington. I still want to call them the Washington Bullets.
Bullets, yeah.
Bullets,
so
yeah.
Anyway, we got lots to talk about. Especially we're going to talk lots and lots of Lions, I'm sure. So let's just start with that, because we're on to the divisional round, guys. In a nail biter, honestly an odd game where it looked like it was going to be a shootout in the first half, turned into a bit of a defensive battle in the second half. The Lions held on to beat the Los Angeles Rams 24-23, moving on to the NFC divisional round. The Lions' first playoff victory since 91, first home game period since 93. Thanks to the Packers' stunning curb stopping of the Cowboys in a 48-32 game, where garbage time really made the score look even that close. The Packers just dominated that game. But thanks to that, the Lions have now become the de facto number 2 seed in the NFC. Karma, I guess. So that means the Lions will host the winner of the Eagles, whose defense is led by the despised, infamous, the hated Matt Patricia, and the Buccaneers, who the Lions have actually beat once this year already. They beat them in Tampa. God, it seems like a decade ago at this point. That was back in October, I think. Anyway, best case scenario, the Lions could win this Sunday. The Packers could upset the 49ers out west, and that could mean a third straight home game for the Lions, which would be the NFC Championship game in Detroit. But, guys, first off, Greg, I'll start with you. What were your feelings watching that game? Because between you guys and the listeners, I started getting a little emotional at the end. It's been so long since I've seen the Lions actually be good, and not even good, but actual championship contenders. And then seeing the emotion on the field and the emotion in the emotion of the stands, where you had people just breaking out in tears. I got to admit, I got a little choked up myself, where I had the sniffles watching that. I mean, it was a very emotional night at Ford Field last night.
It was, and it was almost, in a way, to me, kind of surreal. It was almost like something that you would have a dream about. You'd wake up and say, I dreamt the Lions were playing a home playoff game and they won. And the crowd was going crazy. But it's funny though, about the end of the game. When they got the football and it was approaching the 2-minute warning, and when it went down to the 2-minute warning.
And to set the stage, there was about 4 minutes left when they got the ball back.
Right. But when it got to the 2-minute warning, and I knew that the Rams only had the one timeout.
Yeah.
But still, when the Lions got the first down, for whatever reason, I thought that they could not take a knee at that point. I thought, well, they got to run at least one more play, maybe two, because you rarely see a team able to take a knee with like almost 2 minutes to go. But somebody on the sidelines figured out that with the play clock being as it was, and with the 4 downs and everything, that you could get away with it. Yep. And when I saw them go into victory formation, I said, what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
But I said, well, they must know what they're doing. And it was certainly it was very dicey, at times for sure. It looked like that Stafford, and that Nakua kid, who was unbelievable. I thought that the two of them alone were gonna.
They could not tackle that guy to save their lives.
No,
they could not bring him down.
And this is I think he's a 5th-round draft pick or something, which is amazing. So good on the Rams for finding him. But yeah, I mean, it was, hey, that's why I said the same old Lions thing is dead, because this was, if they would have lost last night, I'd buy it. Maybe you could say it. But you go 12-5, you win the division, you get your coveted home playoff game like you wanted, you win it, you go to the second round, and you can't at that point say same old Lions. But that ship has sailed. So I think they put the kibosh on that. But I agree with you. I think where I got a little emotional was when I saw that guy in the stands get emotional. They cut to that guy, and that big tough looking guy.
He was sobbing.
Like and you just knew that he felt just like so many other folks that felt like. It might have been when the Red Wings finally won the Stanley Cup in 1997, and somebody they took a shot of somebody had a big sign up that said, Mike Vernon, I apologize. Because he had gotten so much vitriol the year before when they lost to the Avalanche, and they asked Vernon on the ice, whoever was interviewing him, they said, did you see that sign? And he said, we apologize. And he said, oh, I didn't see it, but apology accepted.
And it's funny, Greg, when you bring up the being able to go into victory formation. Jared Goff said he didn't realize it either. All of a sudden, he said, here come all the hands guys that are on the field for victory formation. And that's when it clicked in for him. He thought he was going to have to run a couple plays or two. But no, it's funny because I was kind of doing the math in my head that, they had the one timeout, they had a 2-minute warning. And I'm texting Linda. I'm like, I think two first downs, this game's over.
That's what I said, 2.
Yeah. And as soon as Amon Ra knew it, especially because you saw the way he got up when he converted on the second pass. He converted the first one with the pass to the running back, and then the second one to Amon Ra on both on second and long. Which again, you got to give credit to Dan Campbell for just saying, because standard operating procedure would be we're going to run the ball, we're going to run it up the gut, but no, he says let's end it, let's get the first downs, let's move the sticks, it's over. Put trust in his quarterback that he's not going to throw an incompletion and stop the clock. Game's over. So, no, it was. And how many times have we seen that over the past year and a half with Campbell and Goff? Especially I would say going back to last year's Green Bay game in a very similar situation where they needed a fourth down. That game was a fourth down completion to end the game. So we've
wasn't
seen
that the DJ? But wasn't that one to DJ Chark? That one in Green Bay? That it was the same.
Yeah,
play.
that was the one to Chark. That one, no, I think it was DJ Chark that caught that ball.
Yeah. It was the same play, essentially the same play.
Yeah, because I know we had something similar. If I think Sam Laporta caught a ball like that earlier this year, in the game. So yeah. So Nick, what are your thoughts on all this? Grown men turning into just heavy sobs and. Ford Field. Ford Field looked electric last night. Like it was like, they even had reporters there. Like Larry King, Peter King, in today's Monday Morning Quarterback said it was probably the loudest venue he'd ever been in. That it was just insane last night. And I can understand why people would be so overcome with emotion.
I could believe it too. We're old enough to remember the last Lions playoff victory, and that's 3 decades ago. That's not a small time.
Yeah.
to like win a playoff game. So, and the fans in the stands are probably far more religious about it than I am. I think my moment was more with the Wolverines and
which we will get to
their
later.
championship. Yeah. So,
yeah,
but I could believe it. They showed that one guy who was like 89 years old had season tickets to the Lions from the year after they won their last championship.
Right.
It's like I don't know if I call the guy loyal or nuts. I'm not sure which, but imagine how that guy felt.
Yeah.
Like he probably couldn't believe it. It's just all of this. And if you think about it, it's 3 years in the making since Dan Campbell took the helm and Brad Holmes. 3 years of drafting, barely missing the playoffs last year just by, it's not the luck of the draw.
Some botched calls in that Seahawks-Rams game last year.
Right. And so, they just barely missed it. And then this year they started high. They had a little skid in like October-ish, November. And, now they're going into a playoff game at home. The Rams were hot at the second half of the season.
Yeah. 7-1
They have a really good quarterback. Yeah, they have a really good quarterback. This game could go any direction. The Lions, let's be honest, still have a shaky defense.
Yep.
And so it could go any way possible. Someone pointed out that I keep thinking of the Monty Clark, praying for the field goal against the 49ers back in the early 80s in that playoff game.
Yep. The Eddie Murray missed field goal, 43 yards. Yep.
That's right.
And Gary Danielson threw 5 interceptions, and they were still in a position to win that game.
That's right. That's the same old Lions thing. That's what didn't happen in a close game for the Lions. So, I mean, they look legit. Honestly, I might rather face the 49ers in a game
than the Packers.
Philly and the Bucks, it's a wash for me. I'm indifferent. I'm not actually. I'd like to see them play against the Eagles and the offense ram the ball down the fucking throat of Matt Patricia. So in that one, I'm totally behind the Lions on that. So, but hopefully this is legit. And they've shaken the monkey off their backs. As an old Lions follower, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, and so far it hasn't dropped. I haven't even seen a stinky sock. So, maybe they finally shook that same old Lions monkey really off their back.
Yeah, I saw Dave Burkett, the Free Press beat writer, posted something to the effect of, beating Stafford, then beating Patricia and he said. Then beating Patricia and the Rams, and then say they beat the Packers in the championship game, it'd be like a half century of all those monkeys, half century of monkeys just being completely tossed off their back. It'd be like an exorcism practically if they could do all this stuff. I mean, it would be absolutely amazing if they could pull some of this off. But
And they, they won it's not only they just got into the playoffs as a wild card, they got into it as a division champ, which is another monkey off their back because it's been a damn long time even for that.
Yeah. How many times have we seen the Lions back into the playoffs essentially? Quite often whenever they did make it. Yeah. And that's something to bring up, Greg, is I have a feeling this probably is the best I've felt about a Lions team since that 91 team. That went into the playoffs on a roll and then absolutely steamrolled the Cowboys. But all the other, there's been they've had 9 straight playoff losses. And to be honest, did you feel good about any of those teams actually making any kind of noise in the playoffs? Probably not.
No, not really. No, not really. And not just because they were mostly played on the road either. They just weren't bona fide contenders. You mentioned there were some times they backed in or got in with 9-7 records or whatever the case may be, but no, absolutely not. The thing that was interesting about Nick was talking about, he was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I understand that feeling, but what struck me, and I can't believe they did this. The Lions went an entire season without losing consecutive weeks, and I don't know when the last time they pulled that one off.
I heard that it was 1973 of all years.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
No, it could have been 73 because they started off like 0-1. No,
I swear I saw. I have to look it up. I swear it was 73.
Yeah, it couldn't have been because they were like 6,
anyway,
7.
Continue.
It doesn't matter. Anyway. Yeah. They went the entire season without losing consecutive games. That's the first. Okay. There's no shoes dropping there, because there was no losing streak. There was nothing that made you think, "Oh, here we go again," kind of a deal. And the other thing that I think is interesting about this whole thing is now they can go into, not only do they play another home game, but now they don't have to play under the specter of all these storylines. Now you don't have to worry about the 32-year streak anymore. You don't have to worry about. Well, they already slayed the division-winning dragon that Nick mentioned earlier. They don't have to worry about the streak anymore. They don't have to worry about the playoff losing streak. They don't have to worry about Matthew Stafford and the Jared Goff storyline. They can just go and play football, whether it's the Bucs or whether it's the Eagles. We joke about the Matt Patricia thing, but that's really nothing. That's really nothing. When you think about what this was all about with the Stafford thing, they can just now go, and everybody on that team now has a playoff game under their belt. The head coach does. A lot of these young Lions who've never been there before have a playoff game under the belt now. They play at home again. There's a lot of things going right for them that may, and with the Packers upsetting the Cowboys, it makes you wonder if there isn't some stars lining up here for, because who knows what the Packers could do now. On the one hand, I don't like the notion of them becoming the Cinderella story and becoming the Packers again, but I need them to be the Packers against the 49ers, because if the Lions can finagle a home playoff game for the NFC Championship game, I think they will go to the Super Bowl, because I don't think the Packers will beat them twice in Detroit, number one. Number two, I can't imagine the Lions losing an NFC Championship game in Detroit. But first things first, I think this was, and the other thing too, guys, is I really believe this was the toughest. It's not often that your opening playoff game is your toughest. But I think that this was probably the toughest matchup they will have this postseason, and that includes the 49ers, because of all the storylines and all the streaks they got to get off the bat, monkeys off the back. And by the time they play the 49ers or whoever they play, all that stuff's going to be long gone. And so I wonder if things aren't starting to line up in their favor.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly. It's expectations are changing. I remember going into the season, I said, I just want a playoff win. And now it's like, well, yeah. It's like, as Greg said, I mean, there's a lot more on the table at this point. And they're playing of house money as it is. And that's the thing, is that, the way things are aligning, I think you mentioned this as well, as Nick, is that this might be the best quarterback Lions play.
Yeah. I mean, Stafford was tough. I agree with you guys that they really couldn't solve Stafford and Nakua together
at all.
I mean, Nakua had like 182 yards receiving, so that's not, and they couldn't tackle him. So it's just a matter
of. The one time they stopped him was their last play on that 3rd and 14th play. Which Rams fans are all upset, saying there should have been pass interference, which we will also get into the referees who made some interesting calls last night.
I'm not going to get into that. You know what? The referees botched some calls on both ends. So to me, that's a wash. The fact that I barely heard Aaron Donald's name the whole game.
Yeah. Right.
They're not going to let him beat them. That's for damn sure.
Well, I mean, Goff runs like a wounded chicken. I mean, if he has to run, they're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, one of the few times that Goff, like Greg brought up, that wounded duck lateral was caused by one of the few times where the Lions gave up a pass rush, and he tried to make that play there was the that is the golf. That is when golf is not someone you want to create, so to speak. Just when he tries to do too much, that's when things go off the rails. When he's at his best, when he's just running the offense. And what I did notice about that game last night with Goff is that there was no easing him into the game. There's no several handoffs. He was firing away from the get-go.
Yeah. I mean, maybe a couple of odd things just is in the very first series, the Lions, David Montgomery was doing really well. He was hitting him for 5-10 yards a carry.
Yeah.
Right.
And I wonder, and he just kind of disappeared after like the first couple of series.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see him. Where was he in the second or third quarter, where you just kind of want to wear down the defense, where you want to just eat time off the clock and not let Stafford on the field.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a bizarre thing. But I will say one good thing, Greg, you were kind of mentioning this earlier, is Dan Campbell has really figured out how to use, I don't know what the hell just happened. Dan Campbell has really figured out, there I am, how to manage the clock at the end of games.
Yeah.
And like this playoff game wasn't the only one. He did this like a couple times during the season too. It was just, I think I'm going to say it was a masterful use of the game clock. And just not give the other team a chance to come back and beat you.
Yeah.
Because
well, let's get into that a little bit. It's on the list of things to talk about, and that was specifically that it looked like Dan Campbell outcoached Sean McVay. Between the Rams were left without enough timeouts at the end of the game, and there were honestly the two biggest decisions for Campbell in that he went for it. He went for the touchdown on 4th and goal from the 2 in the second quarter. That resulted in the touchdown pass to Sam Laporta and a 21-10 lead at the time. That was actually their last touchdown of the game. And then the second being, this is probably the one that, like, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? And that was when the Rams were called for holding on Aiden Hutchinson, who for that matter had a great game yesterday. But on the 3rd and 4 play at the line's 34. So Dan Campbell accepted the penalty, pushing the Rams out of field goal range. If he hadn't accepted the penalty, it was going to be like a 53-yard kick. Not a gimme by any means, but Campbell hoped that his defense could make that one stop of Stafford on 3rd and 14. They got the stop, and then you could argue why. And I think Greg kind of alluded to this. McVay essentially, I won't say waved a white flag, but I think he put a little bit too much trust in his defense to get the ball back, because they punted on that, giving the Lions the opportunity to get the ball and end the game, which is exactly what they did, because, again, McVay had used up 2 of his timeouts early in the third quarter. So essentially, as we mentioned, only took 2 first downs, and the Lions were in victory formation at 1:50 to go. So this really was Dan Campbell kind of schooling the so-called NFL wonder kid in Sean McVay.
We make fun of, or I've made fun of, and a lot of people have made fun of the Los Angeles Rams, not only just the Rams, but the Los Angeles Los Angeles sports fan in general.
Yeah.
Is not the most rabid sports fan in America. Let's face it. They're just not. There's a different kind of a fan base out there. And you can tell it when you go to Rams Twitter, which is what I did. I went to Rams Twitter, and it's the posts there. If you go to a real NFL city's Twitter, especially right after a game, there's just one tweet after another of either pitching or whatever. There's a praise, pitching,
fire the coach,
right? or lots of praise too if the team won. So and you just see one tweet after another, and that are hashtag whatever that team's name is. Hashtag Rams last night. And the tweets were like, I would go 4 or 5 tweets and there would be like some spammy tweets and some clearly non-fan tweets. And then I get to a fan, and then I go 5 or 6 more down. There'd be another fan. Sparse. Totally non-passionate. But the few fans whose tweets I did read were all saying the same thing what you said, Al, which was they were bemoaning the punt on 4th and 14. Why? And I said, I alluded, like you said, I alluded to it in my piece. It's like, why, when you've got Stafford and Nakua, who all night have been just torching the Lions at secondary, what have you got to lose at that point? Okay, you're going to give up some. If you don't make it, give up some field position. But my gosh, to just assume that you're going to get one more shot at it, and this is what I took from that. And I wrote this. I said what I took from that was Sean McVay, the little genius that I say sarcastically, saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to prove to everybody that I was right about Jared Goff. He can't save this game. He can't get that first down or two that he needs to win this game. I know I can stop him, even though they really hadn't stopped him all night. I'm going to get the ball back. And my guy, my Super Bowl winning quarterback, is going to take this thing down to the end, and we're going to kick a field goal at the buzzer. I know that's what he was thinking. And it was full of hubris. It was here's the other thing too, Al. You mentioned the Campbell McVay thing. Yeah. Campbell did the right thing when he accepted that holding call. It would have made it 4th and 6 or something like that. Had he I'm saying declining it. I mean, accepted it. Had he declined
it would have been 4th and 4. Yeah,
or 4th and whatever it was. And he would have kicked, like you said, 52, 53, 54-yard field goal. Certainly, I don't know how good their kicker is, but certainly within an NFL kicker's range. Or a makeable 4th down for McVay should he have chosen to keep his offense out there.
Yeah.
So I think Campbell, even though, like I said, the Stafford Nakua thing was electric, I think Campbell did the right thing, took them out of that holding penalty, took them out of field goal range, and they were forced on, to get a decent chunk of yards before they could consider a field goal. Of course, they got the incomplete pass, which made his decision look even better. But why McVay punted on 4th and 14 in that situation, like you said, it puts a lot of eggs in the defense basket. And let's face it, they did get better in the second half, but that's asking an awful lot from that defense now to essentially you're saying, I need a 3 and out here, guys.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do that late in the game when you're on the road and the Lions have that many weapons at their disposal, especially a veteran running back like Montgomery, who just is so reliable to grind out 3 to 5 yards and keep the clock moving. That's asking a whole lot of the defense.
Yeah. It's the aggressiveness is, and I think the other thing to bring it up is that the aggressiveness, I think, is starting to get in the heads of other coaches and their decision making, as to, which they're affecting what they're going to do, because they think, well, if we do this, and Campbell is going to be overly aggressive and whatever, and it's starting to affect how other teams a game plan for the Lions at this point. So yeah, it's for years, we were so frustrated by Jim Caldwell. He's the type who would punt the ball from like the other team's 35, that kind of shit. So the C. Campbell, and to be honest, he is sometimes he can be overly aggressive, but for the most part, he has done pretty darn good about picking his spots as to when he's going to do it. And he picked the perfect spots last night to make the perfect decisions. I mean, it's refreshing to see, as Nick mentioned, a coach make smart decisions. Because for years we haven't seen coaches make those kind of decisions with the Lions.
I think one of the things too is, Greg, you're calling the McVay's decision to punt a little bit of basically arrogance on McVay's part, but I say McVay basically took the conventional football wisdom of punting.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with what Campbell's doing. They're going to start other coaches are going to start copying him because he's considered aggressive and unconventional. And I'm saying he's probably playing the odds, and he's got a good enough team where he's, if he goes for it on 4th down, they got a shot of making it. Yeah. To get the first down. So,
yeah, when you got chain movers like Amon-Ra St. Brown and and Sam Laporta,
running backs. You got
and a pair of running backs who are actually surprisingly good between the tackles. Yeah, it's very understandable why it makes more sense for the Lions than a lot of teams to go for it on fourth down. And I also found it interesting that the NBC broadcast were giving us the analytics of when where they stood on when they should go for it on fourth down, and the from the 2, it was like automatic go for it, which they were able to convert on. So for a supposed meathead, Dan Campbell is very forward thinking when it comes to because the last thing you're used to seeing from especially an NFL coach is forward thinking, because for decades NFL coaches were known for their conservatism. So to see coaches start to realize that the best defense is a good offense, so to speak. The best way to score points, keep the goddamn ball. So going forward on fourth and short makes a hell of a lot of sense nowadays, especially when you got kickers that can drill the ball from 60 yards and things like that. And the Lions don't have that for the most part. So that makes it even more sensible for the Lions to be aggressive when they're in the opposition territory.
I'll point out one other thing that kind of caught my attention in general. This isn't so much. This is maybe more so praise for the defense. Now, I don't think the Lions have a great defense. They a good quarterback can shred them easily. But for some reason in yesterday's game, the Rams really sucked in the red zone.
Yep.
They were terrible. I mean, these long passes to Nakua, the Rams were beating them. But now when you're in like less than 20 yards away, all of a sudden it's a different ballgame. They just could not punch it in very easily. So,
the Lions couldn't stop the Rams between the 20s, but once they got into the red zone, they were in the red zone 3 times, 3 field goals. That's a huge win for the Lions. That's literally the difference of the game.
Right.
And which is interesting, Greg, that over the past 4 games, the Lions have been unable to stop the number 1 wide receiver in each team. With Justin Jefferson with the Vikings and CD Lamb with the Cowboys. Hell, I think Jefferson must have had like half a season's worth of yardage in those 2 games. Yet realistically, with giving up all these yardage to the top wide receiver, they went 3-1 of those games, and honestly should have went 4-0. So it's like the Lions defense, for some god awful some reason, they figure something out here when they get deep in their own territory. They have taken that bend but don't break defense to the damn extreme, where they can't stop anybody until they get to the 20, and then it becomes a battle to get into the end zone. And I'm actually shocked at this point that they'd be able to pull it off.
Yeah, they of course it does get harder. It should get harder for teams, especially pass happy teams, to get the ball in once you get inside the 20, because everybody tightens up a little bit. Yeah, it's the teams that have a balanced attack and can pound the ball like the Lions, who generally have a better red zone TD percentage, because they're able to get yards in different ways. If you look at those possessions that you're talking about, where the Rams, like you said, 0 for 3 touchdown wise, their offense just changed. They weren't able to run those same routes that they were able to run between the 20s, and they relied on some alley-oop type passes, and those didn't work. They tried to go to cup, that didn't work. But if you look at those possessions, they really didn't try to pound the ball in. They just turned into a passing only offense, and the Lions got just enough pass rush, not a lot, but just enough to kind of throw some timing off on a couple of those plays, make Stafford a little uncomfortable. But they didn't. It was the difference of the game. There's no question about it. I mean, there's absolutely no question about it. But that's hats off to the Lions defense, because it wasn't really, I don't think, a lack of execution by the Rams. I think it was just good defense.
Yeah, like Brian Brant's tipping that pass on a blitz. No,
Right.
one of those, that's the sort of stuff that the Lions are able to pull off. But that makes a lot of sense. That all of a sudden it makes it easier on the Lions defensive backs, so they don't have to worry about guys getting behind them.
Right.
Because there's nowhere to go.
Right.
So they, so they're able to play a lot tighter defense, and that really plays into the Lions. I won't call it strength, but it nullifies a lot of their weaknesses when they don't have to worry about. Because how many times did we see Cam Sutton running for his life trying to catch up with a receiver last night? Like I texted last night in a little group chat. My kingdom for a CB1. This team desperately needs a number one cornerback because guys like Cam Sutton and pretty much any other cornerback on this roster, they're number 2 and number 3 guys. They don't have a lead corner. This team had Sauce Gardner or someone like that, or how about Darius Slay? It'd be a huge upgrade for this team. So I can imagine that in next year's draft, that's got to be what they're thinking, that they desperately need a couple cover guys. It wouldn't hurt at the linebacker position either. But we need to touch a little bit on the storylines, because there were so many storylines in this game, and those storylines are probably why it was this game got stuck in the headline slot of Super Wildcard Weekend, because getting the Sunday night football crew on primetime on NBC. Because I know a lot of fans are like, oh, it's the Lions, they're going to stick them on the Peacock game, which no, there's just, this was such as Greg mentioned, this was a good matchup. It was a tough matchup for the Lions. And the storylines, but this wasn't a playoff game. It was like a soap opera. I mean, the Rams are the hottest team in the NFL. The Lions are a former laughingstock with a massive chip on their shoulder, and they have something to prove after years of ineptitude and bad luck. And if it could go wrong with the Lions, it would go wrong until this year. You had prodigal son Matt Stafford returning to Detroit as the bad guy. Jared Goff had a chance to exact his revenge. And that, I think, was the big story. It kind of got ignored at least I thought it got kind of overshadowed by Stafford. The Rams literally tossed Jared Goff into a trade to match salaries. They threw in draft picks so the Lions would take them in that trade. And now Goff had a chance to exact his revenge against the team that discarded him and the coach who said he wasn't good enough. First home game in 30 years. Hadn't won in 32. Desperate to rid themselves of all the luggage, as Greg brought up first thing on this show. You had an absolutely bonkers crowd that desperately rabid for a win. And I mean, and the way things are looking, this ended up being the best game of the weekend competition-wise as well, because the Bills just won. They beat Pittsburgh, and that really wasn't that close of a game either. So this has been the only good game out of the 5 played so far. So this has been, again, this is the Lions getting, and that's the other thing too. The Lions have played goddamn well in primetime. I think they're 5-1 in primetime games now. So, I mean, this was, like I said, this was not just a playoff game. There was so much more involved here.
Yeah. It is a different Lions team.
Yeah.
They got like a lot of monkeys off their backs in this one game alone. And I've said it before, is Goff was when he was with the Rams, he was on a team where his coach hated him. Mm-hmm. As much as you want to say about how good of a football mind Sean McVay was, he was a jerk to Goff in the end. And that messes with and Goff was a young quarterback.
Yeah.
But think about it. He was a first overall pick. He took in what is like second year or something, he took a team to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be a bad quarterback and get your team to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
No matter what. So hell, we had Stafford for how many years? He wasn't even close to the Super Bowl unless he bought tickets. So
think about it. How many times did we see this exact game where Stafford played lights out and the Lions still lost? I mean, this was a Stafford game I've ever seen one. But, Greg, I don't know about you, but when I saw this matchup, I wasn't about Stafford. We'll get into some of that later. This game was all about Jared Goff, and he's the one that, and it came out when he saw all the videos from the locker room after the game or in the interviews in the post game that, obviously they wanted to do it for the fans, but every single one of those players said we were doing it for Jared Goff. And then you had the Dan Campbell speech at the end, which a locker room speech for game balls. He gave one to Brad Holmes. And then the second one, he just said, I'm just going to put, what did he put it this way? You're good enough for fucking Detroit, Jared Goff, and threw him the game ball. Essentially a backhanded slap at how the Rams treated him. So yeah, this is not the Matt Stafford game, Greg. This is the Jared Goff game. That's how it should go down in memory.
Well, let's tell Carlos Moneros that he's been doing is writing about his some sort of axe to grind with Matt Stafford. He's written 2 or 3 pieces now about Stafford this and Stafford that, and he thinks that he was dissing the city, and the fans had a unrequited love affair with him, and I know that's weird, but you're right. This was Jared Goff's night, and it'll be interesting. I'm really interested to see how the team performs now that they've gotten all this stuff, all this crap behind them, all these. Yep. The coaches probably wouldn't agree with me when I say they're distractions. I kind of put them in the distraction bucket, and now they're gone. All that stuff's gone. And with one game, with one victory, they got rid of so many of these distractions, these extracurricular things. It's all done now. So I'm really eager, and the fact that they finally got the playoff win that everybody was waiting for. I really want to see how they perform from here on out. Yeah. If they play looser, if they play better, if this is a situation where they'll just progressively get better in the postseason. I don't think that they're going to rest on their laurels or mail it in next week or lay a stink bomb on. I don't sense that.
No, because they haven't done it all year.
They haven't done it all year, and I don't. Right, I don't see it happening now. If they lose, it won't be because of that. It'll be just because they got beat. But I'm really eager to see how they perform. I can't emphasize enough how much I think this getting all these monkeys off their back can really be a plus, because that, say what you will, that those kinds of things, when you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff and just focus on football. This game's tough enough as it is without having to worry about all that other nonsense.
Yeah. Nick, I wasn't not really much on Twitter, but I know in some other areas of the internet, there was a lot of Lions fans arguing how they should treat Matthew Stafford when he shows up, because obviously there is an entire generation where he's the only quarterback they ever knew. And, and they seem to think of, that guy can do no wrong, so we should not boo him, or we shouldn't, or at least treat him with kid gloves and boo him. And I just found it fascinating that when the game actually went down, they were saying 45 minutes before the ball game, and they're in warm-ups, and they were chanting Jared Goff, while Stafford was on the field and booing Stafford for that matter. I'm like, God, I'm glad the fans at the stadium get it. Stafford comes back next year in a regular season game. If you want to show a tribute video and that kind of stuff, that's the time to do it. You don't do that in a win or go home, do or die game. And I think Stafford, I don't know if he was caught a little off guard by it, but he came off as a little salty in the post-game press conference when he was asked, "Are you happy for Detroit?" Essentially alluding to, "Are you happy for the fans?" And he said, "I'm happy for the players." Now, obviously, he kind of went off. I think he backed off that a little bit, but you could tell there was some saltiness there from Stafford, thinking maybe he thought he should have been treated better when the fan base kind of said, "Screw no, this team has a chance to do something that you couldn't do for 12 years." So I have no problem with booing Stafford and kind of telling him, "You asked to leave. This is on you." And that's the other thing that, if you don't trade a franchise quarterback unless he wants out. The Lions wouldn't have traded Stafford unless he had asked it to be traded, and that's exactly what happened, Nick. So I think the fans were awesome yesterday the way they handled the Stafford situation.
Honestly, even what I've kind of noticed in social media, there was no Lions fan that I could tell that was like rooting for Stafford, to be honest. And that's the way it should. Look, their team is in the playoffs. They played damn good football all year long. They earned themselves a home field game, and they got it. It just happened to be against their former quarterback who wanted out.
Yeah.
It was bizarre, like the first year he was gone because that whole Detroit Rams thing. But
don't get me going on that. Oh, I hated that.
But it was kind of stupid then. It was kind of odd. Like it was kind of living vicariously through him. Fine, he's got his Super Bowl ring. To hell with him.
Yeah.
He's coming in here to beat the Lions. That's his job. That's what he's getting paid for.
Yeah.
And I think the only ones who tried to make this as kind of some sort of retarded homecoming was the media.
Yeah.
It was trying to make a story out of this. It's not.
Yeah.
Matthew Stafford is the opposing team's quarterback.
Right.
They should be booing him. He wanted to leave. Fuck him. Let him leave. Take his wife with him. Don't come back.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to hear about his wife. And, and I'm not even going to start about that. That gets on my nerves. But
yeah.
And I honestly, it was kind of a stupid question by whoever asked it at the post game. Whether he's happy for the city.
How you feel about about Detroit? Yeah.
It's a stupid question. He's the opposing team's quarterback.
Right.
Are you telling me if the Packers came in and beat the Lions in Detroit, they would ever ask Jordan Love, if the Lions beat the Packers, is Jordan Love ever going to say, how he feels about the Detroit fans? That's dumb.
Yeah.
So the Lions fans were all behind their team.
Yeah.
And that was very clear. And that's exactly where they should have been.
Yeah.
To me, it was just a stupid, artificial story by the media. It's been 3 years since he was gone. To hell with him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that Detroit Rams stuff would be like Tigers fans wearing Detroit Astros jerseys when Verlander got his World Series. It's ridiculous. I don't get that at all. I can see you can be happy for that, but to do with again, I think that just comes from a combination of the Lions being bad for so long and a bunch of the younger generation not knowing another quarterback. Because, guys our age, especially me and Greg, to me, in a lot of ways, Stafford is no better than Greg Land.
You hit mute, Al.
Yeah, Al, you hit mute.
Accidentally. Oh my goodness. Anyway, I'm sorry.
You said he was no better than Greg Landry, and then I don't know who else you mentioned.
You know what, like Greg Landry and Gary Danielson, Scott Mitchell did. They got them to the playoffs, and that was it.
Yeah.
Stafford did the same thing. He got him to the playoffs 3 times, and if you ask me, he came up woefully short. There was that New Orleans game. If people are like, well, look at the numbers he put up in that game. Yeah, he put up those numbers because they were down like 4 scores in the first half. I mean, Stafford never – whenever there's a big Lions game, I know Greg will agree with me here. When there is a big, important Lions game, Matthew Stafford almost always came up small. And, so I don't have this attachment to Stafford like I think the younger generation does, because to me, he was just another Lions quarterback that ultimately failed, even though he put up numbers. And so I don't have this treat him with kid gloves thing. No, Matthew Stafford is a good quarterback who just failed with the Lions.
Well, there were a lot of reasons for that, of course.
Yeah, it's not just him, but he was part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's no question about that. And it's funny, Al, because typically. And Nick was talking about it a little while ago about he left and screw him and all. Usually in Detroit, when a guy leaves on his own volition, whether it's because he leaves via free agency or he asks for a trade or whatever the case may be, that hardly ever goes over well with the fan base. They don't like it when you don't want to be in Detroit. They absolutely don't. They usually take the tack of what Nick was talking about. Screw him. He's gone. He's history. And they've done it with a lot of guys, a lot of really good players in this town who have left, even if when it wasn't necessarily their wanting to leave, but it was assumed by the fans that person wanted to leave. They don't want
Sergei Fedorov, for example, I think is the big one. He did not deserve the vitriol he got.
That's a great example. That's frankly, that was one of the people I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of players like that who, if you voice any sort of malcontent, discontent with not wanting to stay in Detroit, they don't want to have anything to do with you. And this whole Detroit Rams thing, though, I think may have been less about Stafford and more about the fans' disgust with the franchise. Yeah. I think this was their way, using Stafford, their way to kind of give the middle finger to the Lions organization by doing that. Now, the year that they did do that, the Lions were 3-13-1. Okay, they were the first year under Dan Campbell. Not yet had there been built this culture. Not yet had there been this love affair with Dan Campbell. He was still a very I'm not sure about this guy kind of a thing. So the fans put their stock into the whole Stafford thing, and I think they were trying to make the Lions franchise look bad. And I think so. I don't know. That was so much about Stafford, although I'm sure some of it was, but I think a lot of it was they were just trying to give the middle finger to the Lions.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that was part of it. Then, at that point they were still same old Lions, right?
Right.
So
for sure.
And here, all on top of that, Stafford left, and you're mad at the Lions for creating such a lousy environment that another one of their greats just wants out.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And he's kind of like, the third head on with Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson. In their case, they retired.
Yeah.
But Stafford still had some years left, and he says, "I'm out of here." And he had gone through 3 coaches at least, and I don't know how many coordinators. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they seemed rudderless. So you kind of don't blame him in that sense. You're getting, you're hitting 30, and this team's starting over yet again. But at the same time, he asked for a trade.
Yeah.
He asked to leave. Okay, leave. And one of the things when that first happened, I think that first year, some player came in on the Lions and wanted to have Stafford's number, whatever, 9, I think is what it was. And there was an article about it that player called Stafford, asked him if it's okay to have his number. And I commented on that. It's like, this is stupid. This is an active player. He left. Who the hell cares?
Because JMO is wearing it now at the moment.
Right.
So man, it must have been him. So yeah.
I'm with you there.
But it's not retired. He's not in the damn Ring of Honor or any of that bullshit. That number was an active circulation.
Right. I kind of said, this is nonsense. Who cares? He's just another player. And a lot of people agreed with me, but some people were like, oh no, it's a custom after a great player leaves that, you ask permission to use his number. I'm like, he wanted to be fucking traded. He didn't retire.
Yeah. And the other, what did he ever win?
So the hell with
if he's not in the Hall of Fame, pure and simple.
That's right. He's not a Hall of Fame Lion. So
yeah.
If you want number 20, that's another conversation.
Yeah.
So it's not the same thing.
Yeah. Completely agree. It's the genuflecting over Stafford. I'm glad. I'm with Greg. I'm glad this is over and done with. And honestly, this next game is just going to be talking football. Well, maybe not if Matt Patricia shows up.
That's going to be really scraping the bottom of the barrel for a story. I'm sure the NFL will do that, or the networks will do that.
Yeah.
But that's garbage story.
How are they going to dance around, Nick? The story was between Detroit and Matt Patricia is he's hated. He chased off good players. He took a borderline playoff team and made them bottom of the barrel. And the fact that he keeps failing upwards, or at the very least failing sideways, or hell, he helped get Bill Belichick fired by why he was running the offense in New England. I have no damn idea. That alone should be a firing offense for Bill Belichick, that he allowed him to even get near an offense. And then seeing Eagles fans losing their minds right now over Patricia's defense in Philadelphia. Talk about Schadenfreude. I am loving seeing this. And like I said, that game starts shortly. And I would not be surprised if we see Tampa here next week, because the Eagles, guys, talk about a team that backed into the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's the Eagles right now, because they look bad at the moment. They can't stop anybody. I mean, we're talking about how the Lions' defensive struggles. The Eagles look worse.
Well, they don't like the offense. They don't like the fan base. There is beside themselves with was it Brian Johnson, their offensive coordinator. They don't like Sirianni anymore. They're beside themselves. They're ready to nuke it over there too. Like every NFL fan base is when you go on a losing streak. They're not playing good football by any stretch. The Eagles. I think the Lions can handle either of those teams, especially in Detroit. They've already beaten the Bucs once. Baker Mayfield doesn't scare me in Detroit. I know he's done well there, but that they don't scare me. They don't.
He's no Stafford. I'll tell you that right now.
No, I mean, but you can't. I mean, don't get.
He's a decent quarterback. Lightly. But,
Well, you can't take any team lightly at this juncture. I know that, but I'm just saying that I just think that the Lions opening playoff game, to me, might be the toughest game they play, including the 49ers game, if they play that game. Because you mentioned house money, Al, a little while ago, and there's no way the Lions are going to go out there with as favorites, expected to lose. And I don't know if the 49ers are all that much better than the Lions are. I really don't. I mean, they had their little 3-game losing streak. The 49ers did midway through the season. I mean, then they obviously righted the ship. They're good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it'll be tough to play beat out there, but I don't think it's going to be a situation. The Lions are just prohibitive underdogs. I think they have a legitimate shot.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Brock Purdy as a number one quarter. Well, at least especially Brock. When there was that Brock Purdy for MVP talk, I just laughed. I mean, that was just silly if you ask me. I mean, if there's the definition of system quarterback, at least you ask me, that's Brock Purdy. But again, he has the Niners as the number one seed. But I think that with them, as Christian McCaffrey goes, so go the Niners. I mean, if there's an MVP on that team, it's him, not the quarterback. It's Christian McCaffrey. That guy is. That's who if the Lions play the Niners, that's who I'm trying to stop. I'm putting all my resources on stopping McCaffrey and then let the chips fall where they may. But like I said, we're getting way ahead of things if we're talking about the Niners so far. But I mean, hell, we don't know if they're going to be playing the Eagles or Tampa. But it would be. I think I don't care. I think I'm with both of you. I think the Lions would have no problem taking either one of these teams the way they're playing at this point. So I'm not too worried about who wins this game, but it would be delicious to see Matt Patricia eat some crow, to say the very least, because that crowd will be nasty to him, and deservedly so. I mean, Greg and I were nasty about Matt Patricia back in the day. Well, we despised him. But before we kind of start wrapping things up with the Lions, we do need to talk about Jared Goff. And who has done more in 3 seasons than Matthew Stafford did in 12, at least when it comes to winning. And now the question, when he was first traded for, it was, okay, how long is he going to be here? When are they going to draft his replacement? We all know he's a bridge quarterback. And I think the only guy who didn't say that was Brad Holmes, or Dan Campbell for that matter. But even Dan Campbell, especially when Goff was struggling mightily. I remember Greg and I talked about this. Remember those games where he threw the ball away on 4th down a couple times, and that in that first year,
right?
things got really, really ugly. And you can tell Goff was a broken down quarterback because he had no confidence. McVay had broken him. And now to see him now, with the Lions gave him an amazing amount of leeway, let him do what he needs to do when he goes up the line of scrimmage. He just exudes confidence now and is making the vast majority of the plays the Lions need to play. So, early in the year, the debate was raging, is Goff the guy? Is he the guy you pay franchise money to? And what keeps coming to my mind, guys, is almost a year ago to the day, Brad Holmes said, I think it's a lot easier to get worse at quarterback than to get better at quarterback in this league. And Goff ended the season statistically top 5, top 10 in almost every stat in the league. He played an excellent game yesterday, 22 of 27, 1 touchdown, no turnovers, no picks, 121 rating. He had, like I said, he had the one brain fart, but didn't cost him. Otherwise, he protected the ball, did what he needed to do. They won the game. So he's going into his walk year next year. I guess I'll start with you, Nick. Is Jared Goff the quarterback of the present and the future? Or are you still not sure you want to pay him that $45-50 million a year? That's probably going to cost to keep him.
I think whoever you bring in, unless you bring an established star quarterback, you're going to go backwards if you replace Goff.
Yeah.
It's not that easy to come in and just take over a team. Mm-hmm. I think he's proven himself. I think the coaching staff did something smart. He was actually probably his confidence was shattered probably by the time he left the Rams. And so you got to give the coaching staff and the front office credit for putting him in a position to win and surrounding him with support.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for any young player, especially if their confidence has gotten shaken. It's like you got to keep up that confidence until they're mature enough to do it themselves and they know who they are.
Yeah, because he's still only 29 years old. It feels like he's been in the league forever at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he's been in there like 20 years almost, right? And it's like it hasn't really been that long.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you get your confidence shattered by your coach, it's really hard to kind of come in the next day and perform.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, look at the Pistons, and that's all I want to say about the Pistons. Because they have a super young team, right? You do have to worry about that with young players.
Yeah, I'll just say Jaden Ivey. Yeah, that's all I need to say about how he's being handled. Yeah. Yeah,
so with Goff, he's never going to be glamorous. He's never going to run around the field like
Lamar
Jackson, right? Like Mahomes. Forget it. He's not going to be one of those quarterbacks ever.
Yeah.
But he's a smart quarterback. Can he get smarter? Sure. But the thing is, the players trust him. His offense trusts him. That's not a small thing. That's not a small thing at all.
Yeah.
And he knows they built a team around him where he doesn't have to be the one thing that wins it all for them. So, they have good receivers, good tight ends, good line, fantastic offense, quite honestly. They built a really good one. So, do you pay him? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because I know Greg and I were having this discussion, especially during that little slump he had where he went and had a little turnover binge in like 3 straight games, even though they still went 2-1 of those games. And Goff admittedly did not play very well in the majority of those 3 games, but has bounced back quite damn well. But it is worth noting that I remember that first season, I think, where Dan Campbell, who rarely criticized his players in public, actually, I remember him saying that we need more from Jared Goff.
Right.
I mean, he literally said it, in a press conference, and he rarely says anything about players.
Right.
And apparently, whatever they did, it worked because he's a completely different quarterback than the guy we saw come here 3 years ago. And then he's more like I think people keep bringing up when he outdueled Mahomes on Monday Night Football. I think he's a better quarterback than that now because it really felt like back then it was Sean McVay just constantly in his ear. This is what you got to do. This is what you got to do. And now with it's like he's found his offensive soulmate in Ben Johnson, that's a concern. If Johnson leaves, is Goff, how's the offense going to continue? How's Goff going to handle it? How's it going to go from there? But I know Greg and I were talking about this. Are we sure this is the guy we want to keep? And again, the big question is his lack of mobility can be so frustrating at times, but he has all the intangibles, and that's the conundrum. And I've finally fallen into, you got to pay him because you either roll the dice on a draft pick, and how many times, and for every guy who hits, for every CJ Stroud, there's like 24 Zach Wilsons, and to find a Brock Purdy in the 7th round, that's like rarer than hen's teeth. That just hardly ever happens. When people say, "Oh, you can find quarterbacks late in the draft," you always point at the outliers. That is not commonplace. You don't normally find an all-pro or even a legitimate starting quarterback in the 4th round. It rarely happens. So I have finally accepted the fact that, especially Brad Holmes. I mean, Brad Holmes traded for him for a reason. I think if one guy believed in him, it was Brad Holmes. And I'm finally, I think it is what it is at this point. Jared Goff is this team's quarterback, and he's going to be the quarterback for at least the next 4 or 5 years. He's going to get that extension. It's just a matter how onerous, it could be onerous. It's all up to how the Lions are able to work the financials to where they can keep the window they're in right now open for a few years before the salary cap crunch comes. But it's going to be Goff. I'm with Nick. I think the quarterback now is Goff. It's Jared. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's hard. It becomes harder and harder to make the argument against that. I know that, and you alluded to it. Yeah, I get frustrated with him. I've been frustrated with him with his lack of mobility. I get frustrated with him. Like you mentioned, the little turnover binge you went on there for a few games, but I just got done talking about the 49ers who had a 3-game losing streak. I mean, it's a 17-game season. There's going to be tiny. I remember Goff said it early when they were 5-1 or whatever. He said, there's going to be, we're going to hit some adversity here, and it's going to be up to us to figure that out. And they did. And they even though they never lost 2 games in a row, they did face that with, like you said, Goff's turnovers and so forth. And he does frustrate me with his lack of mobility. But then like I said, also you can't make somebody something he isn't. That he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Mahomes. He's not Justin Fields. He doesn't have that, or Love even. He doesn't have that. He just doesn't have it. So what do you do? Well, you have to concoct a
game plan around it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. You don't maybe roll them out as much. You don't do some of these other design plays that where a quarterback moves around. But the negative to that is you're going to have to accept the fact that he's going to take some sacks that maybe other quarterbacks wouldn't take because of his lack of mobility.
We saw that last night. We saw a couple of plays like that.
Right. Yeah. And he's going to do something goofy like he did last night where he threw the ball back. I don't know what he was thinking there. That could have been absolute disaster.
Disaster. Yeah, the whole storyline changes if that turns into a turnover.
Absolutely. And but again, there is no such thing, and even I have to remind myself this. There is no such thing in the NFL as a perfect quarterback. Even as good as some of these guys are, the Mahomes of the world and Jacksons of the world, who sometimes look like they're perfect, they're not. I mean, they all have something about them that is going to crop up from time to time. And it's happening right now with Hurts in Philadelphia. The whole, that team, when they were 10-1, looked absolutely unstoppable. I mean, absolutely unstoppable. And now, 1-5 later, they're, limping into the playoffs and may lose to a team that's only 9-8. And they ended up having to play a 9-8 team on the road because they botched their last 6 games. And so now they're a road team, like 6th seed or whatever they are, 6th or 7th, whatever they are, 6, I guess 6th.
Yeah.
4th or whatever they are. They're a 4th, I guess. 5th. And so they have to go on the road now and play a team that won 2 less games than they did, but they have to play them on the road because they screwed up the last 6 games. So Goff is becoming harder and harder. He makes some dumb plays. He throws some interceptions from time to time, but who doesn't? If you think you're going to go out there and find a guy, and I would love it if the Lions could snap their fingers and all of a sudden Goff was this scrambling guy who could elude pressure and he bouncing off the offensive lineman as he looks for extends play. I would love that, but he's not. So what you have to, like you said, create a game plan that just doesn't have those elements. And but if you're gonna have a guy that's going to go, this far, it's already gone to the second round of the play. It's probably going to go to the third round. It's really hard to say. Well, he's not our guy. I don't think he's the guy. Well, who is the guy then?
Yeah. Last night's I think last night is the game that finally the fans said, "This is our guy." I mean, Matthew Stafford never got that kind of treatment. The treatment that Goff got. And I think the fan base sees that, and that they have seen this journey from essentially a broken down, gaslit quarterback who a Super Bowl contender just tossed away, and saw him build himself up to the point where he's putting up all-pro numbers. He had the second most yards in football this year, over 4,500 yards, 30 touchdowns. If you look at any passing stat, he was either top 5 or top 10. I think the lowest he was top 9 in a couple stats. The guy is an upper echelon quarterback, and Greg's right. There's no perfect quarterback out there. Lamar Jackson. No, Patrick Mahomes might come closest, but even he is not perfect. But. Yeah, it's. I think the debate's over. Jared Goff's the quarterback. He's going to get a deal probably this offseason. It's just a matter of how much it's going to be. I mean, come on. If Danny Dimes gets $40 million a year from New York, Goff's going to get 50. And don't give me that. Oh, he's going to give him a hometown discount. It doesn't happen. Just because Tom Brady did, and he could do it because he had a gazillionaire wife, and it just doesn't happen. Whenever a good starting quarterback, when his contract comes up, he gets paid. That's just how it works in the NFL. So Goff's going to get paid, but hopefully, I would hope that it can be backloaded or give some, voidable years or something on the deal that can at least allow them to keep the band together for 2 or 3 years and make the run they're capable of. And that run might even happen this year, but. God, if they could tidy up, the pass defense a little bit, and maybe get a second edge, another pass rusher, sky's the limit for this team. It really is.
Well, there's one other thing, and let's not forget this is a team sport. So even though the quarterback is a really integral part of a good team, the one thing you can put a good quarterback and surround him with nothing, and you're going to go nowhere.
Yeah.
The thing that the Lions have done is surround them with the players, that he works well with, and the schemes where he's in a position to succeed. And that's kind of what I mean by putting him in a position to succeed.
Yeah.
They're not gonna design plays like they would for Lamar Jackson. It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah.
That would be insane.
No naked bootlegs, come on.
So, or the tush push or whatever.
Yeah. The tush push. There you go.
And so they did it smart. Like a lot of times I see in the NFL, you bring in a defensive coordinator, and usually one of the first stupid conversations is he a 3-4 defensive guy or a 4-3 defensive guy? The Lions have a 4-3 and you're a 3-4. Now you got to get your guys in. If you're having that conversation, you just picked a bad coach.
Yeah.
Because a smart coach would come in and say, "What do I got here?"
Boy, you just described Rich Rod.
Well, Rich Rod.
In a lot of ways. Yeah.
It was Matt Patricia too. Yeah. Matt Patricia was an imbecile. It's like you have a 9-7 team, finished 9-7 2 years in a row. You say, "What do I got here? What could take me over the top?" instead of saying, well, we got to put our system in this way. And it's like, well, fuck me. That's 3 more years of losing, guaranteed.
Yeah.
So, but, the Lions didn't do that. And so they put so they did they sort of built the team in a smart way.
Yeah.
And I think Goff is only going to get more confident and stronger and savvier. He's not going to get any faster.
Yeah.
As time goes by. And who are you going to put in? Like a rookie in his place? There'd be one damn generational rookie.
Yeah.
To come in. So.
Yeah, and the odds of that, no. Yeah, this is the way it's going to be. This is how it's going to end up going. No doubts about it. So it's just now a matter of filling in the gaps, specifically in the defense. Like I said, they need a cornerback. Another edge would be nice. And then they probably have to start thinking about, they're going to have to pay some guys. Amon Ra's going to need to be paid next couple of years. Penei Sewell, that guy, he's probably going to end up being one of the highest paid offensive linemen in football. I mean, there's an argument he is the best offensive lineman in football. So some of these guys are going to get paid. I mean, Amon Ra, he just made the All-Pro team. So I mean, some of these guys are really going to get paid. And it's going to be interesting to see how the cap gurus are able to manage it. Especially Goff's got to get paid. Amon Ra's going to get paid. Sewell's got to get paid. There's a couple other guys coming off rookie deals that are going to get paid. So, but then again, that's why when you have a guy like Holmes, who continues to nail the middle and late rounds of the draft. That's why the Rams have bounced back so well after going all in on a Super Bowl year, and they got back to the playoffs 2 years later because they always seem to hit on the late round drafts, and Holmes has continued that here, which has been refreshing to say the least, considering the Lions' kind of iffy draft history once you get out of the first round.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Before we kind of wrap things up with the Lions, anything you want to add, Greg?
No, just that I think that their window is, to me, opening. They're young. All those core guys that you mentioned and the ones that you didn't mention are all 23 to 25 years old, and that's what's scary about this team. If they can, continue to grow together. So many of these guys were there just, with the 2021 team that was 3-13-1. And you mentioned Sewell, I tweeted it out. I think Sewell can be their version of Anthony Munoz. If they can keep him in Detroit for his career, I see him being a 15-year Lion, a perennial All-Pro, and maybe a Hall of Famer. I mean, this kid is it's scary good how good he is at such a young age. He did not play a lot of college football. And the fact that he's already this good, I remember when they first drafted him, and some of these, really
wasn't he like 20 years old when he was drafted?
Yeah.
He was young.
Some of these experts, I don't like his footwork. I think he's overhyped. Blah blah blah. Baloney. He is unbelievably.
He's a ridiculous athlete.
And you touched on it. Not too often do you use that word in describing an offensive lineman, but you're right. Yeah. He's that. He can be the right or left, whatever ends up playing, right or left tackle for the Lions for the next 10 to 15 years and make 8 or 9 Pro Bowls and 10 All-Pro teams. He could go in the Hall of Fame. That's how good he is. Yeah. And I don't usually say that about anyone, but this guy is unbelievable. And so they've got a lot of so St. Brown and Hutchinson and you name it, Branch, all these guys, Laporta. All these guys are either rookies or second-year players. And now here they are on the precipice of maybe getting the NFC Championship game. That kind of experience, Al, and I said it when the Tigers went to the World Series in 2006. And you and I, of course, weren't doing the show back then, but when we were doing the show, I mentioned the fact that at that point, guys like Verlander and some other players were these players who were young and had already at that age had won some individual awards, had been to a World Series, made some all-star teams, and at such a young age. And I said that can only help them. And sure enough, the Tigers in that era, that was some of the best Tigers baseball that we've ever seen. These Lions players have a chance to be always in the mix every year for a playoff berth. One of the preseason favorites to win the whole thing. One of the preseason favorites to win the division. They've got a lot of good young. Their core is young, and you mentioned Goff, and you're right. He's not young, but he's not old either.
Yeah. And just to kind of close it on Sewell, I still, to this 3-year era of Lions football, to this day, my favorite play is Sewell going in motion, catching the tackle eligible pass against the Vikings to ice that game.
Yeah.
Even the announcers are like, why is the tackle in motion? And next thing you know, he's wide open 10 yards downfield to ice the game.
Right.
That to this day, I think that that's the play that kind of like, I'm starting to really like this team. But yeah, it's been a wonderful week of Lions football. But now before we get to talking about Nick's favorite topic, which would be the national champion Michigan Wolverines, let's get to question 2 of the birthday game. So Greg, fire away.
This is for the DVD of Kansas City Bomber.
Yes.
This person made his name in football. Was born in 1979, played 20 seasons in the NFL at quarterback. So they answer that question. He played his first 5 seasons in the AFC West, and his next 15 seasons for
Warren Moon.
Nope, for a team. No, Warren Moon was no.
Oh, he's way older.
Warren Moon was way older.
All right, never mind.
He played 5 years on the West Coast in the AFC West and played the other 15 years in the NFC, where he won a Super Bowl and broke Johnny Unitas' record for consecutive games with throwing a touchdown pass.
Is it Drew Brees?
It's Drew Brees. Yes, absolutely. Drew Brees, 45 years old today. Congratulations, Drew. I almost forget that he played for the Chargers.
Yeah. And the only reason he hit the open market is he was hurt. He's coming off a shoulder injury.
Shoulder surgery.
And they drafted Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, and they said that the Dolphins were one of the teams that were bidding for his services, and they bowed out and went with Dante Culpepper instead. And that was the reason that Nick Saban, at least according to Saban, said he left the Dolphins because he wanted to coach Drew Brees. And when he didn't get that chance, he took his ball and went home, so to speak. But yeah.
All right. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I was thinking 15 years with one team, I thought he was like 15 years first, and then like he got old and they sent them somewhere else. Yeah. Okay. Warren.
Oh boy, I can't wait to watch Raquel Welch take on the Los Angeles T-Birds in roller derby. Or was she? No, that's right. She was with Kansas City, and because I remember as a kid watching roller derby on like Channel 50, like later Saturday
me too.
nights.
Yeah.
The Los Angeles T-Birds.
T-Birds. Yeah.
All right. Oh, I want to bring this up before we go to the Lions, because what's the scoop out on the out in Seattle when it comes to what's going on with the Seahawks and Pete Carroll? I got every impression Pete Carroll does not want to stop coaching.
That's the impression I got too.
Yeah.
Everybody here is stunned.
Yeah.
I didn't see much in terms of what the paper is saying. I was just, but it sounded more like, and I'm going to say this, and I know it's getting recorded, but Jody Allen's considered kind of flaky in a way. Yeah. A little bit difficult out here, and but I don't know if it's her, or I don't know. From what I've read in the papers, it's hard to say really what's kind of pushing him out.
Yeah.
But and I don't know what the deal is with this. I'm going to be a consultant or advisor kind of role. But it basically caught a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah.
That he stepped down. So
I'm surprised, Nick. I'm surprised that he's even because he came out. Didn't he come out publicly and kind of bash the front office and say there's non-football people making the decisions? He didn't sound like a guy who was going to come back and work for the organization in any capacity. He sounded like he was kind of taking some parting shots.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because some of what I say is what I saw from like the official press release. from the team,
Uh-huh.
and he's going to stay on as a consultant. And you know how those go. Like Joe Dumars was stayed on as a consultant with the Pistons, when he got pushed out.
Yeah.
So that kind of crap.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're going to do, whether they have some grand plan of doing something else, or did he rub Jody Allen the wrong way? Here we go again. I think this thing is going to evolve for a little while longer too.
Yeah.
So I heard like a rumor thrown out that one of the candidates to take the job is Dallas's defensive coordinator. I can't remember his name now. Because he used to be the defensive coordinator in Seattle
Quinn?
when they won.
Dan Quinn, yeah.
Yeah. It seemed like he didn't have the stomach or didn't have the interest in going for a head coaching job. But so who knows? And the way his defense played yesterday, so.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know what's going to go on. Honestly, if you watched any of like the Seahawks games, they got a little bit boring, and the quarterback Geno Smith wasn't doing so great later in the season. So who knows? Who knows? I think they kind of underperformed, to be honest. So.
Well, you know what? There is a very well thought of movie called Cocktail, and there's one line that stands out in that. I think a bartender told this to Tom Cruise: "All things end badly, otherwise they wouldn't end."
Absolutely.
And I think what's going on in Seattle is exactly that.
Yeah, there's another thing too I've noticed in sports, even with like the best coaches. Let's say a team has like the best coach of all time in their franchise history.
Yeah.
Some of them know at some point to say, okay, I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm top.
Right.
Like Scotty Bowman did. Right.
Or Nick Saban for that matter.
Right.
Yeah.
And he knew kind of like he just passed the peak, right? That's why Saban is like, I'm a little getting too old for this. He was honest. But if you think about a lot of the great coaches, especially in the NFL, they didn't know when to stop. Belichick, he got fired, right? Chuck Noll, his days fizzled out in the early 80s.
Tom Landry got fired.
Landry sucked in the 80s.
Yeah.
He was terrible. Then there was a lot of coaches like that. And is that Pete Carroll's end? Like, who knows? It may or may not be, but maybe the ownership just wanted to change. Who knows?
Yeah.
So,
that's why I'm always so fit. It's interesting you bring that up. Because I'm always so the farther away we get from John Madden's coaching career, and you look at how young he was when he retired. After he
was like what 40 something. He was
in his 40s.
40? Yeah, mid 40s at most.
And I don't know that he retired with the idea that he was going to be this television icon. I think he just retired because he didn't want to coach anymore. And that, to me, that's so unusual for a guy who's that. Well, first of all, that's successful, and secondly, that young to say, you know what, I don't want to coach anymore. And it didn't really occur to me when it was happening, and even didn't really occur to me because then he became this television icon. So you didn't really think of him too much as a coach. You thought of him more as a TV personality. But when you think about it, Madden was not, I don't even think he was 50 when he got out of the game.
Oh, he was younger than that. He was definitely younger than that.
And frankly, that's fascinating to me that I don't know what, I'd like to go back. Maybe I'll do some research on that. Find out what it was about coaching that prompted him to get out. Because like Nick says, usually these guys, you got to drag them off the field.
Yeah.
I mean, they kicking and screaming. I mean, they just, once it's in their blood, Jim Harbaugh brought his dad back, for God's sakes, as an assistant, Jack. And Jack's 1 million years old. But these guys they get the coaching bug, and it's awfully hard.
Yeah.
Look at Dick Vermeil. He went back into it after I don't know how many years of being.
And he was one of the best color guys on television at that point. He's like a number one college guy then.
Bud Wilkinson got back into it after 15 years. The Cardinals hired him. Sometimes these guys, it's always kind of burning, but with Madden, I don't think he ever really exhibited any desire to go back and coach.
I think I heard some interview with Madden, and it's like I think he was just burned out. He's like, okay, I just had
plus
enough.
there was
it
the
was too much for me.
flying thing with Madden.
Well, yeah, that's true. I didn't think about
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Because it just came to mind that he traveled everywhere in the
Yeah,
Madden
that's
that
true.
bus. And I have a feeling his fear of flying probably is what kept him from going back into coaching.
But he was doing all that travel as a commentator. He still had to go across the country to announce the games.
But he was doing it in the Madden Cruiser. He had the bus.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You know, and so no way you can get away with that with a football team.
Yeah,
but there's probably other things involved. But
yeah,
you know, if he loved coaching enough, he probably would have fought that fear. But it is odd that a guy at his age just said, "I'm done." You know, because
there was an outfielder.
Yeah,
there was an outfielder. Al, you may have heard of him, Jackie Jensen, who played for the Boston Red Sox in the early '60s.
Yeah, he retired young. He won an MVP, if I remember right.
But he retired because he was afraid of flying. He had the same fear of flying, and he couldn't get over it, and so he had to retire.
But usually you're right. Either they're drug out. Most coaches either are go out in a box, or they have to quit because of their health, like Bo Schembechler, or they get fired. You know, and the coaches are wired differently. Because I don't know how someone, Pete Carroll is 72. He looks like he's 52.
Right.
But the hours that those guys are required to keep, I don't know how the hell they do it. There were times in my life where I did work 80-hour weeks, and I had no life, none whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine these guys 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, putting, I don't know how they do it. Those guys are wired weirdly to the point where, they live for the work when most people, it's, they work to live. And I think with coaches, it's the opposite way around.
Yeah.
And, or it's like, billionaires. Most people would say, they would get to a certain point and say, I have enough money. I'm not going to do a goddamn, I'm going to be like Tom from MySpace. I got my money. I'm done. I'm going to travel the world. And yet you got a lot of these guys just continue grinding because more is not, what they have is not enough. More isn't enough. They have to have more and more and more. And coaches, I think, are wired the same way when it comes to competition and work in the sport of football. It's crazy to me. But then again, that's why we're not coaches. So,
well, all right. You mentioned Dick
Go ahead.
Vermeil. Well, you were mentioning Dick Vermeil. I think he quit from the Eagles because he found himself like one day trying to go home, and he was in the parking lot in his car, and he just fell asleep right there with like his hands frozen to the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And he just fell asleep. Yeah. And it was just,
I believe it.
It had gotten to be too much, and they just burned out. But and then there's the other thing too is it's a different situation and a more delicate situation when you have to fire a legendary coach.
Yeah.
Like,
sure.
I mean, Don Shula was way past his prime.
Yep.
He didn't get fired. But Landry, there was hell all broke loose. How could you fire Tom Landry? Well, his team won like 3 games. Last year they won 4. They kind of sucked for several years.
Right.
Belichick too. Do you fire Belichick after 6 Super Bowls?
Yeah.
Well, he put Matt Patricia as part of his offense, so his judgment is kind of like
know a guy who comes to mind who actually went out on his own terms locally, Jim Leland.
Yeah,
he said because he wasn't going to get fired. No way, and he said he had enough. And it was the right decision for him. He's still working for the Tigers as a essentially as an ambassador, special assistant, 10 years later, he just got into the Hall of Fame. Seems happy as a clam. He's enjoying his life now that these guys aren't able to enjoy while they're working. So, I just kind of wish there was more of a life work balance of these guys. I'm not surprised more of these guys just don't drop dead of heart attacks. I just don't know how they do it.
Right. Me too.
Wired weird. Yeah.
Me too.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of guys wired differently. Jim Harbaugh.
That's for sure.
Jim Harbaugh.
Short-circuited a little bit. Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh was brought back to the University of Michigan in 2015.
after about a decade of Michigan essentially becoming irrelevant, struggling through the Rich Rod and Brady Hoke years. Michigan hadn't won the Big Ten in years, hadn't sniffed any kind of decent ranking in years, and Jim Harbaugh came back, got them relevant again, but he couldn't get over the hump. Almost got himself fired after the 2020 year, the COVID year. And here we are, 3 years past that. He's thumped Ohio State 3 times. Made it to the college, won the Big Ten 3 consecutive years. Made it to the college football playoff 3 consecutive years. And this year finally got over that final hump. Beat Washington 34-13 in the national title game to bring Michigan their first national title since 1997. Harbaugh, it's like mission accomplished, or I think the players were saying business finished. Harbaugh accomplished exactly what he was brought to Michigan to do. Make them elite, and they are elite. And what was fun about this, Nick, is that I love, especially in today, especially in college, it's all about the spread and with getting guys in space and throwing the ball everywhere. The Mike Gundy type offenses. Yeah, this was typical Harbaugh ball. He won off the run. They had 303 yards rushing on 38 attempts. They averaged 8 yards a carry. Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards both had over 100 yards rushing. J.D. McCarthy only passed when necessary, 10 of 18 for 140 yards. Didn't have a touchdown, but he didn't turn the ball over. And they had an absolutely dominant defense that forced Michael Penix, who looked otherworldly against Texas. They made him look less than mortal. It was a below average game for him. 27 of 51, 255, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, and he was beat up. He was literally limping off the field. He looked like he'd been through a war. So this core, the core that Jim Harbaugh recruited, finally did something that a Michigan fan base kind of in some ways feels like their birthright, to be an elite team, to be a national title contender, and finally win a goddamn national title. And at this point, obviously things are going to change. They had a lot of guys, because this was a senior-dominated team, or I would say a veteran team, especially because of the COVID year. Some of these guys had 6 years of eligibility. But a lot of guys who have like a year or two of eligibility left are starting to go pro, like McCarthy, Corum, Roman Wilson, most of the offensive line. But they did something that no other Michigan team's been able to do since since Lloyd Carr's prime. And I think you could argue, Nick, that Jim Harbaugh might be the best coach in the University of Michigan history, because he's done more than Bo Schembechler could. And Bo Schembechler did his stuff in an era where I think it was easier. So who knows if he stays or goes and what's going to happen from here. But watching that national title game, it was like just this whole accumulation of these last 3 years of winning plus some disappointment, never being able to get over the hump, and all of a sudden they got over the hump, did it in dominant fashion in the college football playoff, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
I'll let Nick take this one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first thing I'm going to say, go blue is the first one I'm going to say. And,
yes.
But, I got to say, this past year, the team felt different. And I'm saying this in sort of like a fuzzy-wuzzy sort of way. Yeah. It's kind of like people are feeling with the Lions. Like, this doesn't feel like the same old Lions. And this didn't feel like the same old Wolverines that have – a fairly dominant overall regular season. They may lose 1 or 2 games, maybe even 3, and then go to some kind of mediocre bowl game that nobody cares about. And even in the last couple of years, they looked last year and the year before, they looked overmatched by TCU and Georgia.
Yeah, that TCU game, and that was there for the taking. That game was. It really was.
Right. So, but this year felt different. I was kind of nervous because I'm just it's kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Or fine, they had a great regular season.
Poor Nick with these shoes flying all around him.
I know. The Lions, they've been kind of painful on the feet sometimes too,
Yeah.
and leave you with stinky socks in the end.
Yeah.
But when they went in to play the Alabama game,
Yeah.
holy crap, that defense was just smothering Alabama.
Yeah.
And the offense was kind of like had its moments, but it was not that thrilling, to be honest. But the defense was just smothering the Tide. So it was and they had a very different attitude. You know, there was once when I was in college, Florida State came to Ann Arbor, and the players were were walking around campus. You know, both teams were very highly ranked.
Yeah.
But the Florida State players, you see them walking around at night, going to wherever. They acted like we're coming here to beat you.
Yeah.
Not like, hey, we're Florida State. You should bow down to us. Like, we're coming after you guys. And they came after Michigan.
They ran Michigan off the field, if I remember right. Yeah, that was one of those games where it said, "Oh, this is that was that old Southern speed and space stuff when you had the Big Ten was still kind of in their 3 yards in a cloud of turf era, so to speak."
Exactly, and I think Mo had just taken. I think Mo had already taken over.
That was one of his first. That was one of his first years as a coach there. Yeah.
So.
Because I was at that game in the Big House for that one. I remember that.
And I'm thinking, like, why isn't the Michigan team like that? Are they just thinking we're Michigan, we're better than everybody else? No, you better get ready to get beat because they're not University of Toledo. So
and you're
or
right.
Some other small school.
Michigan football did have a bit of that a lot of that arrogance to them at times, and it would come back to bite them in the ass. It really did.
I mean,
you're right about that.
This is the one year I didn't feel they had that at all.
Yeah, you're right.
And that defense was like, we're going to come in and we're just going to keep coming at you. I mean, like, there was one in the championship game last week. There was once where Penix got sacked, and I forget the kid's name on Michigan. Graham was his last name. I don't remember exactly. Yeah. He got to Penix and just threw him like a rag doll. I mean, they didn't want to they had their teeth sunk into Washington. Same with Alabama. Like they weren't giving in an inch. So they were dominant performances by Michigan for sure.
Yeah, because it's interesting to see how the media, I don't think ever bought into Michigan completely, especially in this, in the college football playoff, even though they were the highest seed, the number one seed. A lot of the media was picking Alabama to beat them. So were the bettors, for that matter. Because the spread was really, really close. And then Michigan takes out Bama in overtime. And then Penix has that monster game against Texas, where he looked like he was just dropping dimes. And then all of a sudden, oh boy, Washington that offense looks unstoppable. And you saw a lot of the pundits picking Washington to beat Michigan, and Michigan's defense again just stepped up and imposed their will essentially, and they, and that was why, Penix, why isn't Penix a top 10, a top 5 pick? That game's why, a good defense can stop him, and Michigan just imposed their will on Washington, and it was really Nick a microcosm of the entire season where you got the feeling that why isn't Michigan winning this game by 3-4 touchdowns at this point? It felt like they were always they always had control of the game. They were dominating the majority of time of possession and things like that. But they were only up a score or two, only up 7, only up 10, when it felt like they should have been up 21 or 24. But then again, that was Michigan all season long. It's like they were always in control, but they weren't blowing people out for the most part until late. And that this game was exact. This was like a template. Yeah.
I mean, totally. You would have thought they would have blown out Iowa in the Big Ten championship. Yeah. Much more because Iowa doesn't have an offense. They were horrible.
They have a punter. And they have a punter and a defense. Yeah.
So, and then Ohio State, it was a close one versus the previous 2 years, which there were blowouts.
Yeah. Right.
And, it's almost better that it was a close one, because you really have to stick together as a team to win in close games. It's not a one-person show.
Yeah.
Especially in such a major team sport like football.
Yeah.
But
I still think my favorite win, at least during the regular season, though, was the Penn State game, because this is where the defense really played into us. That once Michigan got that lead, and they knew the only way we could screw this game up is by turning the ball over, because Penn State is not going to score against our defense. We're just going to run the ball. Then they ran the ball 32 straight times to end the game. That was that's Picasso shit. I loved that. I mean, you're talking to someone who grew up during the 10-year war and loves the ground game. Watching Michigan impose their will like that, offensively and defensively on the lines. That was probably my favorite game of the year.
I actually liked the Alabama game at the end where Michigan didn't decide to scramble and try and win it.
Yeah.
It says, okay, let me just end it now and take our chances in overtime, which I don't know if I'd ever seen anybody just kind of like, let me just down it, run out the clock and go into overtime.
Yeah.
But in the end, it was kind of a smart play, right? And because anything could happen if you're trying to rush down the field in the last 30 seconds. Those are opportunities ripe for interceptions.
Yeah, Michigan was a turnover-averse team. They did whatever they could to not turn the ball over. And it was funny that the team they turned the ball over against the most was Bowling Green. Of all teams. I think and that's the game. That's the one weird game that J.D. McCarthy had all year, where he threw the 3 picks and just seemed to struggle with the whole game. And Michigan still won by like three or four scores, but that was the game where I think they had like 5 turn. I think he had turned the ball over 5 times all year. He did like 3 times in that one game. So that was just bizarre. It was just, but yeah, it was like Michigan in a nutshell. It's like I don't think there was a more methodical team on the planet than a Jim Harbaugh Michigan team.
Well, you mentioned another thing too, is that there were no very, very infrequently penalized.
Yeah.
So they did not draw a lot of penalties. I mean, they didn't. What do you call it? They didn't commit a lot of penalties. So that's huge. It's not a small thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Greg, you're awful quiet. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm just listening to you guys. I'm sitting here thinking.
Yeah, we're talking to the Huron here. So
no, I'm just sitting here thinking about
our MACtion correspondent, Greg Regino.
I'm just thinking about. I'm just kind of reflecting on the season and how, this is something that I think back to the 97 team that had to share the national championship, because at that point there was no playoff, obviously, with that whole Tom Osborne thing, going away president, what have you.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm just thinking about how they really, first of all, JJ McCarthy, my God, I mean, clearly to me the best Michigan quarterback I've seen, and I know the Brady thing. I've just got to go by the 1-loss record. He lost 1 game.
Yeah.
1 game.
He was like 25-1 as a starter.
Right. I mean, but then I'm thinking ahead about what they will do, because as you know, I still think that Jim Harbaugh is going to leave. I said it several weeks ago. If they win the championship, he's gone. There's nothing else to do at Michigan. He's already had they're reporting already that he is in Los Angeles interviewing with the Chargers.
Yep.
And so that's just who knows what other teams he may interview with, but it's not going to be. There's one less team for him to go to or for Ben Johnson to go to, because if Harbaugh gets that job, let's worry about Ben Johnson going to the Chargers. But I mean, hey, the defense, in that championship game, I thought Harbaugh made a questionable decision toward the end of the first half.
Yeah.
By what he had he wasn't going to go for it. Looked like he sent the punt team out, called timeout, brought the offense back out. I thought a poor play design that play didn't really have a chance to work. And then then Washington came down, got some momentum there, and the announcers were raving about Washington, about Penix, Washington's momentum. They come out and right in the middle of Herb Street, singing the praises of Penix. He throws the interception, which at the beginning of the second half. And whenever you turn the ball over the first play of a half like that, that it's like hitting the first batter of an inning if you're a pitcher. It always seems to open the floodgates for a big inning. And when you throw the interception, like it was a great interception, by the way. When you throw an interception like that at the beginning of the second half, where you didn't, I would concede your team did have a little bit of momentum. Although I never really was all that concerned because Michigan's defense is so good.
Right.
It just that really kind of flipped the whole script.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And Nick, I have to ask you, how emotional did you get at the end of the game?
It was kind of surreal.
Yeah.
Because as kind of a Michigan fan and alum, you're rooting on your team. They're going to win a lot.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the year, the bowl season is just kind of like they might accidentally win one.
Yeah.
But it was so surreal afterwards. I'm like, I can't believe they're champs. They're and I picked this championship over 97 just because of the way they did the championships back then. It's kind of like,
it's harder to win now. It really is. It really is harder.
Exactly. There's so many damn teams and just like a little bit of chance in there. But this was legit. That was a damn good football team.
Yeah.
In the the championships and the bowl games and everything. So not only during the regular season. So it was really different.
Yeah.
I was on a high for a few days from it. So,
I imagine.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. They beat Penn State, then they beat Maryland in a trap game, beat Ohio State, beat Iowa, and that team terrifies because that defense is so good. And then they beat Alabama and Washington. That's a damn murderer's row when you think about it. That's some very good football teams there. Or at the very
exactly.
There's some or teams that have very good parts of their team. Like Maryland has a good offense, and Iowa has an elite defense. So that was a tough stretch of football. And then when you factor in all the BS going on around them with the Connor Stallions crap and and Jim Harbaugh being Jim Harbaugh, I mean, and the media literally swarming in on Michigan, and is that they win fair and square, which the NCAA essentially said yes, they have won this fair and square. So this is not going to get the banners are not coming down. This national championship is not going to get vacated. So
let me ask you guys this question. I'll ask Nick as well.
Yeah.
Really maybe ask Nick exclusively, at least initially. How important, Nick, do you think it was that Michigan beat an SEC team? Because for so long the narrative has been that the SEC is the elite conference. The Big Ten can't hold a candle to it, kind of like the ACC in basketball. How important was it that Michigan not only obviously win that game to get to the championship, but they beat an SEC team?
That felt really good and really good.
Does it legitimatize it, so to speak? If they hadn't played an SEC team, what they would have said. Oh, you didn't play an SEC team.
You can't beat the SEC. So they beat everybody.
Yeah.
So by beating Washington, did you beat the Pac-12 or did you beat another Big Ten team even? So, but they beat the SEC. They beat the Ohio State.
Yeah.
And, I think they could have beat other teams too. So they got the monkey off their back. Alabama was the last SEC team standing. So,
but you know what they say? Georgia won the eye test national championship. That's what got me, Nick. Is when they picked the four teams to go to the go to the playoff, and you kept hearing this stuff about Georgia might have lost that game, but I think they're the most talented. But isn't that stuff supposed to be settled on the field, not eye test? That's why they got rid of that. What Greg brought up about voting for the goddamn national title. That's why they got rid of that eye test stuff and said we're going to put the four best teams on the field. So I think that's what kind of grinded my gears about this. When you still have some SEC teams, well, they beat Alabama, but they didn't beat Georgia. And why didn't Georgia beat Alabama?
There's a lot of those stupid kind of objections. Like I saw the ones, or I think even Michael Penix was saying this after the post games. Like, if we would have made those passes, we had Michigan, we didn't make those passes. That's why they won.
Yeah, it was us, not them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not because they're good. It's because we didn't have a good game. It's like, well, you didn't have a good game, maybe because Michigan had you on your back and you have cracked ribs and they were throwing you around like a rag doll too.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a good season. Period. I mean, you hear that with a lot of the games. It's because of this, and if we would have made the catch, we would have won the game. It's like, well, you didn't make the catch and you didn't win the game.
Yeah.
So too bad.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this. Since Harbaugh is interviewing, as Greg brought up, he's out in LA, and the Chargers did confirm that he did interview with them today. All right, would you be who do you want Sharon Moore to be the next head coach if Harbaugh leaves, or do you think they should open up the search?
I don't know. I don't know who should be. Like I always think about this. Like it's hard for me to really have a feel. I don't follow it so religiously that I could tell. Sharon Moore actually, he's got a case for him taking over. And when Harbaugh was at Stanford, one of his assistants took over as coach. Is it Brian Shaw? Shaw is his last name, but
David Shaw.
And he's David Shaw, and he stayed at Stanford for a year.
He was there for almost a decade, I think. So and had some good years there.
But Michigan at the same time is going to say, okay, this is a premier program.
Yeah.
We're going to go all out to bring in somebody. Honestly, what was funny is when Lloyd Carr retired.
Yeah.
They had sort of that same attitude. And they ended up with Rich Rod, which was kind of like as kind of a last gasp.
That was oil and water mixer at all. That just did not mix at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. But Sharon Moore's got a case. Why wouldn't the defensive coordinator have a case either? So
Jesse Binder? Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? I mean, you could argue he earned it too, because he had a great defense. So
I just hope they keep that Baltimore Ravens pipeline coming through, because that's where the last couple of defensive coordinators have come from. But
right.
But
you don't want to get another John Brown in this.
Oh God, yeah. But interesting, when you talk about how the coaching search could work if it ever comes to that, is that look what's going on, how the domino effect with Saban. Saban retires. People were shocked, but looking back, they weren't that shocked because he had been hinting at it. And then, so Alabama goes out and hires Washington's Kalen DeVore, who just lost the national title game. And so Washington goes and hires Jed Fish away from Arizona. It's like guy goes from having Pac-12 to the SEC, and so now, or I guess Big Ten, or whatever you want to call it. But then Jed Fish, I think, realizes that, well, I'm going to be in the Big 12, or I coach the Big Ten. We don't want to be in the Big Ten next year. So he's jumping up. So, there really is no, I don't know how to put it, because these decisions that got made super quickly. I mean, DeBoer, it was like 3 days, wasn't it? 2 or 3 days, and he's in Alabama.
It was pretty fast. It was really fast. And so, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to – Michigan should act fast. I think there was something weird at the time that they – and it was all that Les Miles stuff.
Yeah.
Back then.
Because Herb Street said there was going to be Les Miles on national television, if I remember right.
Yeah, and there was a big buzz wanting, Les Miles coming home to lead Michigan. Oh God, that could have.
Well, that was the Lloyd Carr hated him. I remember right. Yeah, I think that was playing something into it. Yeah. But,
and it won't be Mel Tucker. I'm pretty sure of that one.
Are you sure? But yeah, but
So-
I'm with you. Who knows? Because Michigan is an elite job. Michigan is the destination job, and Moore has a legit claim to at least be first in line, to be interviewed, be a big candidate. But a job like that, you're right. You don't say it's you. You do need to talk to some other people. I'm with you there. At least that I think that kind of ship has sailed for the most part. Like Tom Izzo. When he took over Michigan State, or it was like that's how it was just going to be. When Judd retired, it was going to be Izzo. You don't see that much anymore. So
like the succession. I mean, Michigan had a succession plan. Mo to Mo, then
and to Carr,
Lloyd Carr. So it was kind of going that way.
And that's where that Michigan man stuff came from as well. And that's another thing. Let me ask you, Nick, where do you fall on the Michigan man has to coach a Michigan team thing?
That came from Bo Schembechler telling Bill Frieder to fuck off when he took a job with another school and wanted to still coach Michigan in the tournament.
And deservedly so, yeah.
And Bo used that phrase in a very specific way. Yeah. It's not this kind of like fictitious mythical creature kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's taken on a life of its own, and then it really got out of hand. I think when they hired Rich Rod.
Yeah.
And fired Rich Rod, and then went to Brady Hoke, who was more like just a big cheerleader more than anything else.
Yeah, I always got the Hoke was kind of like a dime, like a dollar store wannabe Bo kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Like he bought too much Michigan team paraphernalia at the drugstore or something.
Yes, exactly.
And, no, they need to pick a smart coach. My guess is the AD at Michigan.
Yeah.
Because he's dealing with the mercurial Harbaugh, has been thinking about this already. So,
I'm sure there's a list. Yeah, you're right.
There's like no way. Like every single year, this comes back like a bad rash.
Yeah.
Like, this whole conversation is Harbaugh going to stay or he's going to go.
You're right.
So who knows?
Yep, but in the end, it was a hell of a season, wasn't it, Nick? You got to be thrilled. You have to be thrilled.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Usually, I can't even remember who won the championship. And,
yeah.
It's like I'm going to remember. I don't know when the next one's going to happen. You have no idea.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a good point because Nick Saban, I think, really changed what fans think the expectations should be for a national title. That is so stupidly rare what he did. Winning those six national titles.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen. Michigan's won what? About every 30 years, Michigan wins what? That's, I think, kind of par for the course for the most part for a lot of schools. So Ohio State won one in 2014. And
2002 as well. So.
Yeah, exactly. So for them, it's been about every 10 to 15 years. So yeah, it's not expectations are stupidly, I think, out of whack, and it's going to get worse with the 12-team playoff because then they start getting into the basketball thing where any get one bad game and you're screwed. So that could get then you got a 12-seed Cinderella making a run, and that could really skew at people's expectations. God forbid Penn State might win a national title that way.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath for that one, but like there are a couple of schools recently that have won, like have been to the championship and have won a couple, like Clemson not too long ago.
Yeah.
Then there's Georgia most recently.
Georgia, yeah.
And I mean, what Alabama did is a freak of nature. Good luck anybody reproducing that.
Exactly.
So like some teams will have a stretch where they have like a core group of players that stick around long enough to win more than
Michigan.
one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's it was a fun year. It's been a fun year of football. As long as we don't talk about Michigan State, even though they gave us a lot to talk about. But hopefully we have at least another month of football to talk about, with the Lions. So I think it's time we start wrapping this podcast up. This has been a long one, and it's been all football for the most part. So I think it's time for a jerk of the week. So Nick, who is your jerk?
I'm gonna go with something that happened over. I think it was the weekend. Might have been like Friday or Saturday night.
Yeah.
And it's the Chicago Bulls fans. The Chicago Bulls just had an inaugural Ring of Honor.
Yep.
And they wanted to inaugurate the teams from the 90s. So they brought in their players from those championship teams. And because of whatever drama Pippen and Jordan are having, they did not show up for the thing, for this ceremony. But I'm calling and I would call them the jerks, but I'm calling the Chicago Bulls fans at that game the jerks of the week, because they introduced a lot of people. They had Jerry Krause, their GM at the time. They had his widow come in on his behalf. He died like a few years ago. And when Jerry Krause's name was announced, they booed him mercilessly.
Yeah.
And only his widow was there, she's a widow. And, just kind of really shook the woman up.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, the close up of her face. Oh my, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
Was just devastating. And it's like, talk about petty, stupid shit from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
That GM has had something to do with putting that team together.
Yeah.
And getting all the right pieces in. It's not just Jordan and whoever else. Somebody had to go get those guys. So, and he was treated absolutely poor, or his widow was treated absolutely poorly, and I feel bad for her. So, Chicago Bulls fans, jerks of the week.
That's a great one, because
I didn't know about that.
If they get something, it should have been Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner. Who's doesn't the GM work at the behest of the owner? That plays a part in why the team gets broken up. And I think you'd also blame Michael Jordan for that goddamn Last Dance documentary, because they needed a villain in that documentary, so they made it Jerry Krause, and Jerry Krause was not around to defend himself because he's dead. And talk about the bloom coming off of a player. Michael Jordan really is starting to come off as a very venal, grudge-holding psychopath who, his teammates didn't like him. He was a horrible executive, and Detroit fans are always right for hating Michael Jordan. They really were, but that's a good call.
Well, also, Michael Jordan's the one perpetuating this supposed feud with Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah, exactly.
It is Thomas doing it.
Yeah.
So it's just a jerk.
All right, we'll add Michael Jordan to the jerk list as well. That's a good call.
I should put the Bulls fans, the ones that side with Jordan, and even Pippen is slinging garbage too. So
exactly, it's an ugly mess over there. Greg, who's your jerk?
Well, I don't know really who to give this jerk to, but I don't, because I don't know who's responsible for this. But I don't know if you guys caught this. This was back on early January, right after we taped the last episode.
Yeah.
And I don't really pay attention to women's basketball, but this caught my eye. Grambling State women's basketball team played a little college from Texas called the College of Biblical Studies. Now they're based in Houston. They call it CBS. Based in Houston. Okay. They beat Grambling, won this game 159-18. It was a 141-point blowout, the largest margin of victory for any men's or women's Division I basketball game. I don't know who scheduled this game. I understand that some teams will send their teams out. Some athletic departments and universities will send their teams on the road to collect a paycheck or whatever. But I don't know how big of a paycheck this could have been to put your team through this kind of. The score was 82-10 at halftime. CBS turned the ball over 57 times. They shot 19% from the floor, according to the box score. 39 of those 57 turnovers were Grambling State steals. I can't imagine watching this nonsense. Number one, being in the stands. I don't know what these players for CBS must have gone through to have been that outmatched. The Grambling scored the first 34 points of the game, so they were up 34-0 before CBS scored with about 2 minutes ago in the first quarter. I don't know. This is not, we might laugh at this is not funny. And I don't know who scheduled this game, who thought this was a good idea. I don't know. So I'm not sure who to blame here. If I'm to blame Grambling, if I'm to blame CBS's administration for putting their girls out there for the slaughter, I don't know. But this was, if you're beating a team by 141 points, something should have been amiss when this was scheduled, because it's one thing to have a couple of tune-up games, non-conference, gimmies at the beginning of the season. I get that, but this is ridiculous. 159-18. So I don't know who to give the jerk to. But it's abominable.
Good call.
Wow, I'd never heard of those guys.
Yeah.
So is this like their first season or something?
I don't know much about them. I really don't. But obviously the game should never have been never been scheduled.
Yeah, and it's not fair to the players at all.
Grambling 6-5, so it's that Grambling 6-5. Can you imagine if this was a Grambling isn't great? What if they were playing I don't know. The whole thing is just ugh. So
yeah, exactly. Good call. All right. Well, my jerk of the week, I could have taken my pick of several things going on at ESPN right now. There's there's first that they're in negotiations to buy a stake in the NFL, specifically the NFL Network, which would be essentially there would go any kind of journalism going on at ESPN when it comes to the football league. There's also, they got busted for their scheme to give on-air talent Emmys they didn't deserve, that were especially which were designed to go to production people, and they made up names what let me bring it up here. It was Desmond Howard. He was put in with the production people as Dirk Howard, and then when they got the Emmy, they would just change the nameplate to the correct name and then give it to the on-air talent, which they just got busted for, and they had to return all these Emmys that the on-air talent didn't deserve, which was absolutely stupid. But the stupidest thing, I think, is what's been going on with Aaron Rodgers and Pat McAfee, and what's been the actual train wreck that's been. And then they had the interview 2 weeks ago where, he comes on every week, and where he didn't outright say it, but he implied that Jimmy Kimmel was a pedophile and was on it was on the list of the billionaire. What's his name? You know what?
Epstein. That was my jerk.
Epstein. Yeah. So, and obviously when the list came out, Kimmel wasn't on it, and then Kimmel just eviscerated Aaron Rodgers when he came back at television.
Right.
And I think that's a lesson for someone like Aaron Rodgers. Don't make up shit about someone who has a bully pulpit and a team of writers.
Right.
And can go on live television and just rip you to shreds for 10 minutes. And then what's even funnier is that Rodgers tells the New York media that, going into next season, we need to get rid of all the bullshit. We need to, concentrate on the football team. And then he shows up on McAfee the next week, spewing more of the same stupid stuff. So my jerk of the week is obviously Aaron Rodgers for being a nutcase. And also my jerk of the week is going to be Pat McAfee, because that guy, I don't know about him. That guy is so fucking exhausting. There's a term called flanderization, where you take someone who has a personality and then you ultimately amp up one aspect of that personality, and that becomes that person. Like Ned Flanders on The Simpsons, where he was once this normal neighbor and now he's a churchy Joe guy. That's essentially who he is. And now McAfee I get that vibe from McAfee. He has turned up his personalities to such a point there. I find that him annoying, Aaron Rodgers is annoying, ESPN is annoying. So I just make all three of them my jerk of the week.
Oh yeah, I don't blame you.
All right.
I can't wait for Aaron Rodgers to retire. God forbid.
Yeah.
God help us all. Yeah. All right. With that, let's get the hell out of here because this is a long show. We had a lot to talk about. So, Greg, if you could, why don't you let us know what's going on future shows, and also social media as well.
First of all, follow me on Twitter at Gregino. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks, and subscribe to my Substack, gregino.substack.com. I would appreciate that. 2 weeks from tomorrow, on the 30th of January, we will be joined by Eastern Michigan football coach Chris Creighton in our first segment. And then our second segment, we'll talk to Siddy Hall, our resident NBA stats guru. We'll catch up on the Pistons and the NBA with Siddy. So guest-packed show on January 30th where we'll talk basketball and some college football. And so please tune into that. And want to, as usual, thank my lovely wife, Sharon, for putting up with this nonsense. And thank you guys for, in this case, making Monday nights so gosh darn fun.
All right. And Dick, why don't you let the listeners know, actually tell listeners where they can find you online.
Yes, I'm on Twitter. Just look for my name at Nick Milanovich. It's there on the screen as well. And we're usually regularly talking about and often complaining about Detroit sports. So come and join and make some noise with us. I'd love to have more people to the group. So
you guys complain. I can't believe that.
We analyze. We don't complain.
All right. I've kind of dipped my toe back into the social media. You can find me on Blue Sky. It's Albeat at Blue Sky. But if you want to listen to the show, you want, please, as they say, like, share, and subscribe. You can find us at all the usual places you find podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. The kneejerks.net is our homepage where you'll find the links to all the stuff we talk about. You'll find links to social media. You'll find links to Greg's Substack. Please subscribe to that. And also, we are on YouTube. We're getting a little more polished with the video. You know, it looks a little better now. So we're figuring all this stuff out. So if you want to actually see us talk on YouTube, go to our YouTube page. It's just look up The Knee Jerks, and we'll turn it on. So I think with that, I think it's time to get the hell out of here because it's cold. and poor Nick is in his garage freezing his ass off. So let's get the hell out of here because we'll have a lot to talk about in 2 weeks. Like Greg said, we'll have lots of basketball, lots of college football, and I'm sure we'll have lots of Lions football to talk about in the next 2 weeks. So until that time, 2 weeks from now, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha, along with Nick Milanovich.
Ciao, guys. Have a good evening.
And Greg Ito.
Ciao, Italy. We'll see you in 2 weeks.